The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another Kiefer and Curry show. I am Tony Kurre. He is Kip Kiefer here on our YouTube channel. Of course, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, we're available on every major industry. And of course, one of our most listened to shows here on the Tony Kurre Radio is the Kiefer and Curry show. And it's just two guys, two pasty white guys in their 50s talking about whatever the hell we want, which I love.
I might not be as pasty as I was. I was out in the sun a lot last week. I was out of town. So
Your freckles are coming out a little bit. It looks
good.
Good.
It
looks good.
My girlish spring look.
So, there aren't football, baseball, hockey seasons anymore. It's a year-round thing.
Right? Of course.
And Major League Sports, college sports, they've done a wonderful job at making a year-round situation. And the National Football League really took a lot of the oomph in the sports world yesterday by just all of the free agency trades. Just a couple of things. Derrick Henry going to the Ravens, Mixon going to the Texans, Jameis Winston going to the Browns. Baker's going to stay with the Bucks with $100 million deal.
How about that?
Unbelievable. Mac Jones.
He was just a few snaps, Tony, from being out of the league 2 years ago.
And one snap away from going to an NFC championship game with the Bucks.
Oh, I know. Unbelievable. Unbelievable turn of events.
Mac Jones, which I thought it was going to work in New England. It ain't happening. He's going to the Jags. Russell Wilson goes to the Steelers. I still can't figure that trade out. Cousins going to the Falcons. Saquon Barkley's going to the Eagles. I mean, it's just there's absolutely no loyalty in the National Football League. Absolutely none. I look at Ezekiel Elliott, who I'm not a big fan of, didn't like the whole, feed me thing. 3 years ago, the guy's holding out for a contract, waiting to see if Jerry Jones is going to give arguably one of the best running backs in the league a contract. He can't even find a job this past year. I mean, from 1 week to the next week, you can go up here to just looking for a gig. And it's just amazing to me how that's working. And a lot of times it's happening with the running back.
Yes.
The running back just, despite the fact that we talk about how important the running game is in the National Football League. You must have a good running game to set up the pass play in the National Football League. But it's just a matter of, and then I'm thinking to myself, you're only as good as your offensive and defensive lines. You could have a great running back. It's funny. There's a couple of teams in the National Football League who have great quarterbacks, great wide receivers, and great running backs, but can't win squat.
Yep.
Offensively speaking, they're great, but defensively speaking, they've got nothing. And so I wanted to come up with an idea. You have a couple sons, and I have a couple sons. And I wanted you I'm going to build you a bionic football player.
Okay.
I'm going to allow you to make him 6'5", because I think 6'4" is a little short. I think 6'7", 6'6" is a freak. I'm going to go 240, 250, somewhere in that poundage. Unless, of course, you're going to go offensive, defensive line, which you can certainly change. But we have to start somewhere, right? We have to start we have to start with his body. So I'm going 6'5", 240, 250. And this kid has got all the gifts and everything, the acumen. He's got the smarts. He's got the physical being. He's got the want to, the passion to make it to the National Football League as a football player. And you are his agent. And you get to pick the position that your son, or regardless of whether it's your son or just a good friend, you get to pick the position that is going to be best for him for his life. Now, I'm thinking about career length expectancy.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, career length and expectancy in the National Football League is the lowest out of the big four. NHL is 5.5 years. NBA is 5.6 years. Major League Baseball, 4.8 years. The NFL, 3.3 years.
Wow, that's significantly less.
It really is a lot less, almost 2 years less. I'm thinking about position endorsements. Traditionally speaking, do we have offensive linemen doing endorsements for Dick's Sporting Goods? I don't think so.
Not too many.
Is there a position that in the common day National Football League, is there a position that's on the rise and then a position that perhaps is on the fall? In other words, it seems like to me as important as everyone thinks the running back is, no one really cares about the running back. As long as you got one that can get 3.4 yards per carry, you're good to go. The tight end over the last, say, 10 to 12 years has certainly been bolstered up. The fullback, the cornerback, a position that really wasn't seen as a must-have. Now it's a must-have. You have one of the screen quarters on both sides of the ball. And then maybe the history of injuries at that particular position. I threw this question out to Mark Ingram, who, of course, is the AD at for the UAB Blazers. And the first thing he said is, and then we're talking about money, right? We're talking about, roughly quarterbacks are making $10.4 million a year. You're talking running backs are making $1.97 million a year, remarkably less cash.
Amazing.
So if you had to create a position for this 6'5", 250-pound friend, son, brother of yours, and you wanted him to get the most out of his NFL career, knowing the injuries, knowing the CTE status of a position, knowing what the money pays, knowing what positions are franchised, what would that position be? I did want to throw out that roughly 5.5% of all NFL players make it over 10 years in the National Football League, which is an amazing number. And the life expectancy for an NFL player is roughly 3.7 years less than the average public population. Your average NFL player lives to be about 74 years of age. The average Joe in the United States is about 7.2, 7.3 years of age. So I wanted you to think about, okay, you have a son who's in Pee Wee and he's doing really well, and size is not going to be an option. Passion is not going to be an option. Smarts is not going to be an option. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I know I'm going to make him all the way to the National Football League. What position would be best for my son to play where you get a good life out of it? He could earn enough money in a short period of time that he could take care of his family, and he doesn't get too banged up. He's got opportunities to make endorsement money, perhaps well after his contract. I mean, the endorsement money is out the window. I mean, you making $10, $15 million doing a Subway commercial in a heartbeat. You're not making that playing ball. So I wanted to kick that idea around to you. What do you think?
Well, my first reaction would be first base or designated hitter in baseball.
Yes. Well,
that would be my first thought.
And I'm going National Football League only.
Yeah, well, I was gonna pivot to, but if we're talking about a kid that's got a passion for football, and Tony, I kind of remotely lived what you're describing, this experience. When we first moved to Alabama the first time, my son was just turning 9 years old. He had not played football yet, where we came from in Wichita, and he hooked on here. We moved out, bought a house in the Clay area. He played in the Clay Chalkville youth program, which was relatively new. And immediately, I said, well, they have a league that you can play football. And he was just all over it. He was already completely just crazy about the game. And now his current profession as a sports writer, covering the Las Vegas Raiders and flying all over the country and hanging out at practice and in the locker room every day. That is his chosen profession. But he was a real promising young player, even as a 9 and 10-year-old. And they immediately, although he was the new guy, plugged him in here. I told him, and this is how coachable Case was. I told him that first day when everybody was milling around, I said, now the first thing they're going to make you do is run a lap. And most of the kids out here are just going to mail it in and kind of dog it around there. I said, you want to get noticed? You want to have them call attention to you? You run your hardest. You run and try to get to the front. And if not to the front, right behind whoever the fastest kid is. I said, bust your ass and really try. And he's 9 years old, but he's already absorbing this. I said, they will notice you right off the bat here, because they're not going to watch you guys run a lap all year until right now. And sure enough, I'm sitting there amazed, watching my kid right behind the coach's son, who's a quarterback, and 60 or 40 pounds less than him. This kid's fast as could be, and Case is just busting his butt to try to keep up. And when they come to the wire, it's basically a photo finish. And the coach just went, come here, son. What's your name? Case Kiefer. And Tony, Case Kiefer was a star for Clay Chalkville for the next 3 years in youth football. And it was funny as I watched him develop and grow. I didn't, of course, know what size he was going to wind up being. Case is about 6'1" as we speak. He's still in phenomenal shape. He weighs about 225 pounds, but he was never going to be 6'5", 240 or 250 like we talked about. But at that time, thinking about which would be the best way to kind of guide him, they had him play tight end, which was just a blocking position basically on offense, and on defense he played a linebacker and kind of defensive end. And he really thrived. He loved playing defense. That's what he really wanted to do. So I think that's the first part. That's a very long answer to your very short question of, you've got to find out what their passion is first and what they mentally want to do. And he was always a lot more interested in stopping guys and being a defensive force than he was about blocking somebody. And so that was kind of how he developed until he got to high school. And in 10th grade, pretty good sized kid. We had moved to Kansas by that time. Case was a sophomore. Their starting center got hurt in the very first game. The backup was terrible in the second game when he started. The third week of the season, they called him aside and said, "We want to start you working at center," because he had such good footwork. And I'll take part of the credit for that, because I was coaching him up from the time he was basically born. And he started the rest of the season on a team that was the number 2 ranked team in the state for most of the year as the starting center as a sophomore. And as great as that was, he always wanted to play defense. That was his first passion. And so I think, to answer your question, size and different things, that's not the safest position to be kind of an edge rusher or a defensive end. It seems like those guys get hurt a lot because they're going kind of balls to the wall all the time to try to make plays. And he had one of those kind of motors, but that's when he was happiest, and that's what he wound up doing throughout his high school career, and even got some scholarship offers. Again, he got to be about 6'1" and maybe 230 at that time, but he really wanted to be a sports writer. So I would say, if somebody's in that position, or if I'm going to put myself imaginarily in that position, I would say that probably for longevity of career and for and that is kind of the prototype size that you mentioned, because now we've got guys like Josh Allen who's playing quarterback at that size. And you're getting more and more of these big physical guys that have this ridiculous, freakish athletic ability. Look at the game, Tony. Now go back and watch a game on YouTube from 1970 or 1975 even. And the athletes are not as big, not as fast. The game looks completely different now. But I would say that if you had a kid that really was aggressive and loved to make big plays, the specialty of being an edge rusher in the National Football League is one that I think I would probably single out, because you don't play every down a lot of times when you're that kind of player. You come in third down or in passing situations, and you have one job basically, and that's to get to the quarterback. And I think those guys have a better chance than the guys down in the trenches or even offensive players. So that would be my answer. I would encourage a kid that size with some athletic ability and some tenacity to maybe look at being sort of a defensive end hybrid linebacker type. And you're seeing more and more of those guys in the game now.
By the way, we mentioned the league average for playing in the National Football League career-wise, about 3.3 years, which I really kind of surprises me, but doesn't really, when you're talking about a lot of players that come in and they're just bust and they don't happen, and maybe they'll play for 1 year and they're out. And of course, now you're talking about players who are playing for 8-9 years. I mean, Barry Sanders was one of those guys that we talked about him. I mean, just think about the chutzpah he had to be having 7, 8, 9 years in the league and be by far one of the most electric and just thunderous running backs we've ever seen in the National Football League, and hang it up perfectly healthy just because they would not bring in pieces around him to surround him to make
at the top of his game.
I mean, at the top of his game, really. I mean, a guy who could have banked at least another few $1 million. And back then, what was that, 70s and 80s? They weren't making $4 or $5 million a year. They weren't making the type of bonus money they're going to get. And everyone will tell you it's not the first contract, it's always the second contract. Now, of course, a lot's changed with free agency in that, we know pretty much within a couple $100,000 what you're going to be making based on your draft order. But then I thought it was interesting. The position with the least amount of career opportunity is running back at 2.57 years, which really surprises me. And you would think, because it is so low and roughly almost a year less than the average in a National Football League, you think the pay would be higher. It's not. You're asking a guy to basically run into a speeding car 40 times a game, and he's making $2 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, and that sounds great and all, but you're only working 3-4 years at $2 million a year. You're not set for life, baby. You're 26 years old and you're broke by the time you're 30.
Oh, for sure, because very few of those guys are going to come in and be thrifty. They start giving you checks that total up to $2 million a year. That's going to be gone by the end of the season. And for next season, like you say, there's not enough time. The other position that I would throw out there, Tony, is more and more teams employ this H-back kind of what used to be called a fullback. And they basically are seek and destroy guys. I think they have a lot of longevity. And those guys are also about that range that you mentioned. They're that 6'5-ish, 240, 250, that they can knock somebody on their backside and and just plow the road. And now teams are starting to use them because defenses, one of my observations is how non-imaginative so many coaches are and offensive coordinators in red zone and short yardage situations, because those guys, if you line up an H-back and he goes charging off the line, he's totally unaccounted for by the defense. They don't even consider those guys threats. And you just dump off a little pass to that guy in the flat, he's going to get 8, 9, 10 yards every time. And down around the goal line, an H-back is invaluable. Absolutely. Because not only could you change it up and crash him up in there, which doesn't usually work, but the threat of that keeps the defense a little honest. But those guys are fantastic in the passing game, or to put them in motion and run kind of, they're on offense, they're rubs, on defense, they're picks. But those guys are perfect for that. So that would be a good backup position to look at. On the running backs, I think the teams don't undervalue running backs. I just think a team's going to say, I'm not going to pay a guy, give him a 6 or 7 year deal and give him, 10, 12, $15 million a year when he's going to be, limping around and not be able to play half the time or more. And once those guys get hurt, tear up a knee.
But the disparity in pay is so different.
It's vast.
I mean, it is. I mean, we're talking $1.97 million a year for a running back in the National Football, which is nothing. We got some left tackles that are making $14-15 million a year.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the second highest compensated position is the blindside lineman,
as it should be.
Michael Orr helped that cause with the Blindside movie and book. But that's the other considered now by executives, the most important position on the field to protect the guy that you are investing all of your assets in, the quarterback.
It used to be like if you lost a Jerome Bettis or you lost Derrick Henry. I mean, the guy is as good as it gets. I mean, he's Sean Alexander, another one of these guys would just seem like he always Adrian Peterson, another guy just never got bitten by the injury bug. And just, I mean, you just don't see running backs running for 10 plus years in the National Football League anymore. And, you gotta put up some serious numbers. I mean, 1,200 yard rushing year anymore just isn't that big of a deal. It used to be 1,000 yards in wide receivers and you had something special. Now, if you're not getting 1,000 yards, you're not going to get on the contract. It's just amazing because it's such an integral part. It's such an important part of not only the fact that obviously you have to have a good running game in order to open the passing game. And I get that, but even with the way the RPO now has been instituted into the game so purely, and that how important it is. And then of course you got running backs who are turning into great blockers, guys that are just career chippers, even if they can't run the football,
and guys who can catch the ball.
Yeah, and guys who can catch the football.
That's as important for a running back now as being able to tote the rock.
I'm a huge Joe Mixon fan. I love Joe Mixon.
Oh yeah.
He I soloed in on him a lot when I was watching the Cincinnati Bengals on television, and he just never took a playoff. He never took a playoff. The guy just bust his ass every single time.
Yep.
And when I saw them let him go yesterday, it kind of bummed me out. And then I was talking to my son. He's like, Dad, it's a running back. They'll find another running back. They'll have another running back. We won't miss him. I'm like, you know what? You're right. It's hard to believe. There's just
that's the mentality of the executives now.
And I'm sitting there. I'm thinking for like Tony Pollard with the Dallas Cowboys, who basically just came in and took Ezekiel Elliott's job.
Mm-hmm.
They were both getting the football same number of times. Pollard ended up averaging 0.87 yards more per carry than Ezekiel, and they were like, we don't need two of them, so we'll get rid of one. And a guy who came out of Ohio State is ballyhooed, one of the greatest running backs they were talking about we'd ever seen in the National Football League. I don't even know where he's playing. The Raiders.
He's probably done.
Yeah.
He went to New England last year and made no impact whatsoever on a terrible offense. It's amazing. And you look at Tony Pollard. Okay, Ezekiel Elliott, they end up letting him go. And Tony, okay, you're the man. Tony stats fell off immensely this year.
You talk about players who want to play defense. And I played. When I say I played, I did radio with Jay Barker. Jay Barker was a corner. He wanted to play corner. He wanted to hit. He was a hitter. He wanted to hit. He didn't want to play quarterback. And obviously going through high school, all of a sudden, I think he gained 60 pounds and 7 inches in his senior year in high school or some crazy thing. And next thing you know, he got to be a hell of a quarterback, and that worked out really well for Jay. When you're talking about guys like Deion Sanders, though, who obviously is a Hall of Fame cornerback, he didn't want to get touched. He's like, I've got to protect the franchise here. I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Of course, he did Major League Baseball too. He did it all. But I mean, you want to go out there and make tackles at cornerback, you ain't going to be in the league for 10 years.
Yeah, you didn't see him stick his nose in many of those scrums at the line of scrimmage.
No, you did not. And, I think that's why we love players like Josh Allen, who aren't afraid, to run it down the middle of the field. And
what
not
a beast.
Slide. I mean, I absolutely love him. I'm rooting for him. The fact that they have not had any success in the playoffs as of yet, he's one of those guys where he deserves to win a Super Bowl in his life just as hard as he plays. I know he throws the ball away a lot. I know he makes a lot of turnovers, but he's just so fun to watch. But yeah, I'm just trying to think, as dangerous as the game has gotten now with the CTs and the concussions, I'm not even sure it was a show that I wanted to do. I wanted to see what the concussion protocol was this year as compared to the years past. Is it just me, or did it seem like almost every play someone was going in the tent this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's never going to change. I do applaud, and I'll be the first to admit it, that I'm kind of a Cro-Magnon. I didn't like it at first when the new rules came in 5 or 6 years ago, but football had to do something because it was under attack. The fact that so many players, like you said, have early demises, and some really notable players like Junior Seau died way too early with helmet to helmet collisions. They had to change that procedure and had to start teaching a different aspect of the game in the proper way to make tackles, that you could not strike other players with your helmet, especially above the shoulders. And I think it has made an impact, because yes, a lot of guys go to the tent to get checked out, but I think the protocols now are so strict that you've got doctors in the press box that radio down to the field when somebody takes a hard hit and says he's got to get checked out. Yep. There's so much more scrutiny now on every single play. You've got physicians, independent physicians, not team physicians like you used to have. They used to, I remember in high school, we had a guy named Jim Lee that clearly had his brains knocked out, came out and sat out like 2 plays. And, we were playing a high school called Sequoia. They were green and gold. Jim Lee was convinced we were playing the Green Bay Packers. I got to get back in there. and the very next series, sure enough, he's running back on the field. And Tony, I know he was knocked silly. So the whole change of the game in this era was absolutely survival mode for football. And yes, I think there's just so much more scrutiny, but I think with the changes that have been made, you're not seeing, remember the days of Jack Tatum? Helmet to helmet hits was how he made his living. Every time he knocked somebody out of the game, they put a skull and crossbones on his helmet. Yep. I can remember, again, back to high school, where this quarterback for, this is my friends just keep saying, how do you remember all this stuff? The quarterback for Henderson High School, he played with a guy named Ben Bennett, real slick little playmaker guy, always pitched at the right time or kept it. I remember our coaches in high school going, if we can get a real good lick on him and get him out of the game, we'll have a lot better chance to win. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and remember the Sean Payton and the Saints put bounties on other players sure. as recently as 7 or 8 years ago. That's the way the game used to be played, and I think the mentality is probably still the same. But just to survive, football's had to change its style. And I think this whole new generation of players are coming up, and the whole helmet-to-helmet thing is almost a thing of the past.
Hold on to your butt, man, because there's no loyalty. I mean, outside the quarterback, that's the only player that teams want to hold on to. I mean, it's the only serviceable, endorsable player. The Joe Burrows of the world aren't going to be traded anywhere unless they're towards the end of their career and they decide they want to go somewhere else. Or you're a Jameis Winston. Obviously, it never really made it to the point where you're a superstar in the league. But as far as anybody else goes at any other position, it doesn't matter. The one thing I will say I do like about the National Football League, and listen, it is a business, and I get that, and I'm a loyal guy. I mean, I always mention Barry Larkin. I love the fact that Barry Larkin played his entire baseball career with the Cincinnati Reds. I just think there's something sexy about that, and it's beautiful when you can spend your entire career with one organization. Maybe it's because I spent 30 years with one organization before they cut me loose. There was no loyalty there.
Yeah.
And I got escorted out by a police officer. But, it's one of the situations where, you're not going to see 6, 7, 8-year deals ever in the National Football League. And I think Major League Baseball, I think they get so far ahead of themselves. Contracts are contracts. It doesn't matter. You get a 3-year deal. What does it really mean? Certainly in coaching in college football, it doesn't matter how long your contract is. We've always got extensions. Golly, if you got 1 year left in your contract and they're not sitting down ready to put you down to a 5 or 6 year deal, it means you're probably out the door. So, I think Major League Baseball, I think of the Joey Votto days where these guys, or the Albert Pujols days, where they're giving you $250 million deals. That's a hell of a bargain now.
Yeah.
A 10-year, $250 million contract used to be like mind-blowing. Now, a 10-year, $250 million contract is for a utility player in St. Louis.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's it. I mean, it really is. It's crazy.
And the worst offender than any of these, Tony, the NBA. I was reading something the other day that the lowest paid player in the league, and I forgot what his name is, somebody I've never heard of, the lowest absolute bottom barrel player in the NBA this year is making $285,000.
Unbelievable. And I mean, this MAC contracts, I remember when Jordan signed his last contract, it was for $30 million. I want to say it was 2001, maybe 2000. And I thought $30 million, and it was a 1-year, $30 million deal. And it was certainly well worth $30 million. But now $30 million is nothing. Now you've got teams with 4 or 5 guys making $30 million a year.
Oh, yeah.
Basketball teams. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. And I guess we're better for it because we got better players. We're not there to watch the coaches. We're not there to watch the teams. We're there to watch the players. The players are what the ones fill the seats, and that's the fun part. So much like Kip Keefer and Tony Curry, you're watching ABC 3340 every Saturday morning. You're not watching it for the cameraman. You're not even watching it for the legend. You're watching it for Kip Keefer and Tony Curry. You're watching it for the 2 stars. And we're going to be doing it again coming up this Saturday morning. We had, by the way, James Spann on a couple weeks ago. He was fantastic. We were supposed to have Paul Feinbaum on this past week. We had some technical difficulties.
And Paul was standing by. But
he was standing by, and he will join us on the show in a couple of weeks. We've got some really special guests. We've already had Leonard Skinner on. We're going to be working on some ZZ Top interviews. We got all kinds of rock and rollers, authors, anyone famous, politicians. Of course, we're in a political year. There's nothing that's too strange or too weird for us to get into. Like you said, every single week, you never know who's going to be on the starting lineup. So check us out on ABC 3340 again this Saturday morning from 10:30 till 11 o'clock. And of course, make sure you check out Kip's other show called Need to Know right here on Tony Curry Radio. Thanks for checking in, partner. We'll do it again next week.
Tony, looking forward to it as always.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.